What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Flock Forever. I am your host, Chase Coburn, with you here today. It has been a wild, the past week for the Baltimore Ravens. A week ago, we thought Maxx Crosby was coming to Baltimore. It was the blockbuster deal of the offseason. Instead, the deal doesn't go through. The Ravens back out last minute. We're going to talk about some of the specifics there, some of the skepticisms there. They then bring in Trey Hendrickson now to be their star edge rusher as that elite pass rusher. And we're going to break down what that means for this team, but also a plethora of other moves. Bye-bye Isaiah Likely, bye-bye Jordan Stout, bye-bye Patrick Ricard. It's a brand new regime in, and they're clearly looking for a brand new system. Plus, you lose Tyler Linderbaum, you re-sign Tyler Huntley. There's so much to break down regarding Ravens free agency. We're going to break it all down here in today's episode of Flock Forever. Hope you guys do enjoy. Please subscribe. Do what you need to do to keep up with all of our content coming over the next few weeks, next few months, NFL draft coverage, both on Flock Forever and on Chase Sports News. And it's always a fun time of year, this time of year, as the Ravens are bringing in new players and looking to improve their team and really amplify their chances of being a Super Bowl contender next year. So please be sure to tune in. We're very, very excited for this one. I've been thinking about this one for a while. We'll start off here. Bye-bye, Maxx Crosby. Yes, hi to Trey Hendrickson. What a situation. I had no idea what was happening when the Ravens backed out of the Maxx Crosby deal. I did say that it was probably because they were bringing in Trey Hendrickson, and that is what happened. And look, I know Baltimore's taking a lot of hate for backing out of the Maxx Crosby trade. I really don't think, though, they were trying to cheat the system, because the main argument is like, oh, the Ravens just realized the value of Trey Hendrickson. But say maybe they were able to pay him a little bit less than they thought initially. They would have still paid $5 more million a year. And that it probably wasn't even that drastic a change in his value. They would have still gone for that option over Maxx Crosby in the first place for 2 first-round draft picks. The Ravens didn't suddenly get an epiphany of, oh my gosh, we could get another transcendent pass rusher without giving up 2 first-round draft picks. That was always at the forefront of their mind, and that's why Eric DeCosta went out and said that the Ravens were actually trying to add them both to this core. Would they actually have been able to execute on a Trey Hendrickson Maxx Crosby pairing? It would have been very, very expensive. They wouldn't have been able to add other players. But with Lamar Jackson's contract renegotiation, possibly extension in the coming weeks, they would have contractually been able to pull it off. Now, I know it was shady and it was very ambiguous. If I had to make an estimation of what probably happened, the Ravens were probably hoping to get them both. But what probably happened is the Ravens were going through with this trade. They saw 2 first-round draft picks, still in the back of their mind, knowing Maxx Crosby's history with that knee injury and with the surgery and everything that's gone on with him the past few months. They probably took the physical, again, completely kind of conspiracizing here, complete conspiracy. What probably happened is the Ravens knew Maxx Crosby's injury history, but then brought him in for the physical and realized he was a little bit more hurt than they thought. That injury was maybe a little bit more extreme than they thought, and they probably reached a breaking point of, are we going to spend close to $30 million a year, give up 2 first-round draft picks for a player who has been durable throughout his career, but do we think he's going to be able to play at that same level given that injury concern? And at that point, the Ravens probably said, let's back out of this. Let's get our 2 first-round picks, one this year, one next year. Let's get those back. Let's sign Trey Hendrickson as we always planned. Still have a really, really good pass rusher, which I don't think he's as good as Crosby, but we'll break that down in a minute. They'll still have a very, very good pass rusher, and then now have some additional financials to work with in free agency and have your first-round pick to build. Because I think part of what the Ravens realized, too, is in the beginning stages of free agency, you lose Tyler Linderbaum, you lose Patrick Ricard, you lose Charlie Kohler, you realize you're losing a lot of pieces left and right, and the more assets you have, the better. And so I think the Ravens probably reached a breaking point. And look, was it shady? Was there some greater plot behind it to screw over the NFL? Possibly. I know there were so many ramifications with this deal and kind of a domino effect because, man, the Cowboys didn't go after Crosby, and then the Bills couldn't get Hendrickson. It kind of affected so many other moves across the league. So I understand some of the skepticisms regarding this move, but I genuinely do believe that it was the right decision for Baltimore. Do I think that Trey Hendrickson is as good a player as Maxx Crosby? I don't. I think Maxx Crosby is a much better player against the run. I think he's a little bit more explosive. That's kind of the word I like to use with Maxx Crosby. But Trey Hendrickson is still a very, very good player, an elite pass rusher. He's ranked among the league leaders in sacks in consecutive seasons, 17.5 back in 2024, finished second in Defensive Player of the Year voting that season, 17.5 back in 2023. So this is a guy who can rush the passer at a high level. And is he the guy against the run that Maxx Crosby is? He isn't. But if you're getting Nnamdi Madubuike back and you have Travis Jones and you're adding a few more pieces to this defensive line, I think you have enough to stop the run. Not to mention Kyle Hamilton and Roquan Smith, who often play near the line, and they're two of the best defensive players players in the NFL, regardless of position. So I think what the Ravens did here, they tried to add them both, but you're getting out of a possible risk with Maxx Crosby. You're getting back your 2 first-round picks, maintaining future draft capital, getting actually a little bit cheaper. I don't mind this move for the Ravens. Again, could it have been shady? Possibly, but like I don't think this was as shady. Again, I keep using that word, or phony, or any of that. I don't think Baltimore got cold feet. I really don't believe that. And so I don't think the Ravens would just suddenly have this thought that Trey Hendrickson could be available without giving up 2 first-round draft picks. I think this is a smart, stable organization. I question some of the moves they made over the past few years, but I think overall it's a smart, stable organization from the ownership down, a franchise that has always utilized the draft really well. And I think the Ravens made the right choice. As for what Trey Hendrickson can provide individually in Baltimore and kind of bypassing what happened in the 5 days, 4 days in the Maxx Crosby era, that was not even official. I think that Trey Hendrickson could do so much for this football team. I think he's a game wrecker. I think he's an elite pass rusher. I think he'll work really, really well alongside Madubuike, Travis Jones, and possibly a Mike Green on the opposite edge. I think what he's going to be able to do in Jesse Minter's defense is extraordinary, because I mentioned those pieces he's going to play around, but he's also never had a defensive coordinator the level of Jesse Minter, a play caller defensively the level of Jesse Minter. And so I think you're only going to see his skills amplified. He's always been the only guy to pay attention to on that Bengals defense, and yet he still was consistently getting 13 plus sacks a season. I think you're going to see that level of production, and that's exactly what the Ravens need here in this pass rush. So I think they should be very, very happy to have Trey Hendrickson. Again, I think he's a little bit worse than Maxx Crosby, but still exactly what they need, and they didn't need to give up 2 first-round draft picks that way. And that was even in the back of my mind, even through all of the adrenaline of the Maxx Crosby deal last Friday. Could they have gotten Trey Hendrickson? And then eventually that ended up being what exactly happened. But I also think that the Ravens should not be blamed for this or penalized for this, which they won't. They are being blamed by a lot of NFL fans. I do think the NFL, though, also needs to fix its calendar with free agency, right? Trade should have to go through officially before all these other moves happen, and it causes that domino effect. I just think it's more of a byproduct of the NFL's calendar and timing issues than it is on the Baltimore Ravens. So either way, bye-bye to the Maxx Crosby era. I think Crosby would have also been outstanding. I'm not going to sit here and lie. I don't think the Ravens cheated the system at all. I don't think it will impact future moves. I think they're a well-run organization, and I think now they have Trey Hendrickson, and that's what they need. And I think in the end for this Baltimore team, it all worked out the way Ravens fans would have liked it to have worked out, getting one of the best pass rushers in the NFL to pair alongside a defense that is very talented, but now with the right defensive mind in charge with Jesse Minter and Anthony Weaver calling the shots. So I'm fine with everything that happened. Very, very excited about what Trey Hendrickson could do in a Baltimore Ravens jersey. Going here, talking about some other moves in Ravens free agency. They did lose Isaiah Likely. And what I find a little bit interesting is that I don't think Baltimore really made an aggressive effort to maintain some of these pieces. And I think Isaiah Likely was one of them. But I honestly think, the Andrews over Isaiah Likely thing never made much sense to me. Mark Andrews has proven time in and time out that he is unreliable in the biggest spots. He doesn't have a touchdown in the postseason. He's continuously gotten worse every single season. He's been less of a red zone threat now in consecutive seasons. I know he had the great touchdown year in 2024, but it feels like consistently he's been almost a non-factor in the offense a ton. I've always liked Isaiah Likely and Charlie Kolar more. And for me, the Mark Andrews extension, which here's the thing that Ravens fans kind of was hard to accept for them. You knew this was coming. You knew the Ravens weren't going to be able to re-sign Isaiah Likely because he was going to get a 12, 13 million, annual value contract. And the Ravens did not have the money to do that after they gave Mark Andrews a very similar deal. And I know I hear it's team friendly and all that. I just never agree with the Ravens' decision to bring in Mark Andrews because of those variables. He is unreliable in big spots, and he's looked awful in the postseason, that he's gotten worse in consecutive seasons. You look at that Buffalo game as kind of the epitome of his struggles. It honestly felt like a Lifetime Achievement Award contract, and now the Ravens are letting Isaiah Likely and Charlie Kolar out the door. And look, we're going to talk about some of the stylistic changes a little later on for this Baltimore offense, but I think it's undeniable that Isaiah Likely and Charlie Kolar as a 1-2 punch at tight end is better than anything Mark Andrews can provide. I honestly wouldn't have mind just bringing back Charlie Kolar and maybe Likely and just letting Andrews go. Again, this really felt like an award, or it felt like a Lifetime Achievement Award where the Ravens felt like they needed to extend their all-time leader in receptions, yards, and touchdowns, which, again, Andrews was great at a time, but he's getting worse, and I think Kolar's a better blocker. I think Likely's a better receiver. I just like those guys a little bit more, and now I think Baltimore really needs to look for another pass catcher because Mark Andrews is not what he used to be. So I think, honestly, it's not something that we were going to find out right away. It's just something that I thought from the get-go, which was, I don't know why Baltimore was always prioritizing Mark Andrews over Isaiah Likely. If Likely and Kohler were used properly, they would be doing what Mark Andrews is doing and some, both as a blocker and as a receiver. And so I just think even if you look at some stylistic changes offensively, it doesn't really make much sense to begin with that the Ravens gave Mark Andrews that extension and completely bypassed the potential of the Charlie Kohlers and Isaiah Likely's of the world. And now Likely's going to team up with John Harbaugh in New York. Charlie Kohlers teaming up with Jim Harbaugh in Los Angeles. Harbaugh screwing over the Ravens in every which way. But I think, honestly, it was Eric DeCosta and the Ravens screwing over themselves with this contract. And while I know it's a minor change, it's picking your tight end one, which, yes, that's a major deal, but it's not that much of a difference, but I just think when you look at the age and you look at the similar contracts and you look at their dependability in the biggest spots, this could go down as a move for the Ravens, signing Andrews instead of Isaiah Likely. That will haunt their franchise forever. Is that an overreaction? Possibly, but I do think that could be a situation the Ravens fans are looking at in a few years. I also do want to bring up losing Patrick Ricard, which I'm not, again, going to sugarcoat this at all. I was really, really upset when the Ravens lost Patrick Ricard. And that was right before they backed out of the Maxx Crosby deal. It was a very, very emotional time for us Ravens fans. But I was really upset about that one because I felt like Ricard was the entire glue to the running game, especially with Tyler Linderbaum not re-signed and Charlie Kohler not re-signed. It felt like as long as Baltimore has Patrick Ricard, their offense is going to be fine because Derrick Henry runs so well behind Pat Ricard. Pat Ricard has worked so well in this offense. He played so well last year, consecutive All-Pro seasons, always been one of, if not the best fullback in the NFL. And the Ravens used him perfectly. But then I read an article by Yahoo Sports, and apparently, according to The Athletic and many well-respected reporters like Jeff Zrebiec, they shared that the Ravens really didn't make much of an effort to retain Patrick Ricard, who, again, also subsequently left and went to John Harbaugh's Giants. But the Ravens didn't really want him, and it didn't look like they made a significant effort to get Charlie Kohler either. And it felt like such an obvious decision to bring those guys back because, again, of what they did for the running game, what they did for Derrick Henry. But I honestly think now the Ravens are just done with smash mouth football. And I think that's what a lot of Ravens fans need to accept. And as I kind of accepted in the midst of all the free agency decisions, like Declan Doyle and Jesse Minter are here. It's a different regime. Like when you brought a new offensive coordinator, that was one thing. John Harbaugh's method was, let's still run you up the gut. Let's still play smash mouth football. They didn't really play smash mouth football, but that was at least the style in the final few years. And you had Derrick Henry and you had Patrick Ricard, the follow Patty up the gut mentality. And that worked really well. Jesse Minter is different. Jesse Minter is different, and Declan Doyle, most importantly, Declan Doyle is very, very different from what John Harbaugh and Todd Monken did. He doesn't run a smash mouth offense. He runs, as I kind of like to call it, a horizontal offense. He values speed. He values agility. He values quick slant routes. He values options. That's what he likes. He likes guys like they brought in Durham Smythe, another really, really big addition for this Baltimore team. And that I'm going to break down as kind of a backup tight end, but he replaces Kohler as that primary run blocker. And I think Ravens fans, while it hurt so badly to see Patrick Ricard go because of what he's meant for this franchise, I think Ravens fans need to accept that they're kind of moving on from that style. They're not playing the smash mouth football style anymore. And so I think that Declan Doyle is essentially, or Eric DeCosta is feeding off of what Doyle wants. That smash mouth football that the Ravens play with Greg Roman and Todd Monken, that's not going to work. Now, how that vision aligns with Derrick Henry and others, I don't know, because Derrick Henry is a smash mouth football player. So how they use him in a different way, especially in the latter stages of his career where he's still going strong, but he's not as agile as he was a few years ago. I think that's an interesting conversation for Baltimore, something they'll need to figure out in that meeting with Declan Doyle on this offense. But also, I am very curious, or I'm also, it's funny. I agree with maybe letting Ricard and Kohler go if you want to change the system of the offense. However, I was shocked they let Keaton Mitchell go because Keaton Mitchell feels like fits the mold of what Declan Doyle would want in his offense. But nevertheless, he's gone. And so I think that, look, it hurts to lose Patrick Ricard. It hurts to lose Charlie Kohler because those guys meant so much to the run game last year. But I think you just need to, not to sound like the 76ers, but you kind of got to trust the process here. And you got to hope that Declan Doyle and Jesse Minter and Eric DeCosta know what they're doing and that their visions align and that this new vision for the offense is going to pay off. And so I think if you're the Ravens, again, it hurts. It's a big blow. They're going to need to find different ways to work offensively, but I think you need to trust that Declan Doyle, who we talked about this in previous episodes, has been known as one of the most well-respected offensive minds in the game and could be a head coach next year if things go well this year. You need to trust that in his first year of play calling, he knows exactly what he wants to implement with this Baltimore team and knows exactly what he needs to do to get this Baltimore offense back into that elite echelon of the National Football League. And so again, it hurts, but I trust Jesse Minter and Declan Doyle to reconfigure and redesign this offense and to get another elite group with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry at the helm. One of the things that I do not like was the offensive line. And look, I'm a very fair critic of Eric DeCosta's. There's nothing that he could have done and that the Ravens could have done to bring back Tyler Linderbaum. I didn't even know if he should have reset the market at center. I knew he would just because of the way that the center market was looking. He was really the only top guy here in this center free agency class. I thought maybe it was going to be between $20 million, $23 million a year. He got $27 million annually with a drastic amount guaranteed on a 3-year contract. Look, Baltimore wasn't going to bring him back, and they're right for that. For that price, that's a little bit of an overpay. I think it would really serve if Baltimore did pay him that type of money as a real desperate move for this franchise, which is exactly what they did last year with Ronnie Stanley. And at the time, I was in love with that move. But you saw just in 1 year how things can go from so great to so poor with Ronnie Stanley at left tackle. And so, and they're paying Ronnie Stanley now $20 million a year. I also think, look, Linderbaum was going to reset the market, but he wasn't great last year. I feel like he didn't start the year well, especially as a pass blocker, and he finished outside the top 10 among interior offensive linemen in run stop win rate among interior offensive linemen. And so I think, again, Linderbaum was very, very good. I don't think he was great, and I think for $27 million, it would easily serve as an overpay, especially when the Ravens were planning on delivering contracts to Trey Hendrickson and a few others to try to bulk up their defense and maybe add some playmakers and weapons to Lamar Jackson's arsenal on offense. And so I think Baltimore was the right decision. It was the right decision for Baltimore to look elsewhere on the offensive line, but now it is certainly the top priority to improve the offensive line because whether you think Tyler Linderbaum is good or great or elite, he was still a very, very good player and the glue to this offensive line. And now they don't have anybody at that center position or at a lot of the interior of the offensive line. So that has to be the top priority. Forget wide receiver, forget cornerback for a second. The Ravens, or even another edge rusher, the Ravens need to do whatever they can to add pieces to this offensive line. I thought John Simpson was a solid pickup for 3 years at $30 million. I think he'll serve as a really serviceable guard like he did a few years ago in Baltimore. And I think that's fine. A solid starting piece on that offensive line. But I think that they need to figure out something else. Now, I know at center they did sign Javon Gwynn from the Falcons, who's really considered a versatile interior offensive lineman, played in all 17 games for Atlanta last year. They also tried out Danny Pinter yesterday, another NFL veteran that's been in the league for a little while. And I also think that you look at a guy like Logan Jones, also from Iowa, ironically, like Linderbaum. Could the Ravens go after him, trade up late into the first round, or maybe even reach or trade down or find a way to somehow get him? I think either way, the Ravens certainly need to find a way to improve the offensive line. I do think they made a great hire with Dwayne Ledford as kind of the offensive lines coach. He's well respected. He excels in player development. And I think between Roger Rosengarten and Emory Jones and maybe a young center, either way, I don't think he's going to be a veteran. I think it will be somebody younger, whether it's someone who hasn't been in the league too long in the NFL or a rookie. I think Ledford, again, his most coveted trait, according to so many people that work so closely with him, is his developmental skills. And so I think between Emory Jones and Roger Rosengarten and a young center, I think Ledford is going to be able to develop that offensive line, make them a bit more cohesive. And look, here's the thing. The Ravens offensive line used to be elite. It used to be Ronnie Stanley on the left. And, you had a few guys kind of rotating at that right tackle spot. Let's just say it was Morgan Moses. And then you had Ben Powers and Linderbaum and Kevin Zeitler. That was an incredible offensive line. But continuously now, year after year, they've let go of interior offensive linemen, starting interior offensive linemen. And so it's not going to be the elite group that it was 3 or 4 years ago. I don't think that's a reasonable expectation. Could it get to that point? Sure, but I don't think that's a reasonable expectation. But as long as this offensive line is serviceable, that's going to give Lamar Jackson and Declan Doyle just enough time to really operate in this reworked offensive system. And I think that's really all that Baltimore needs in that regard. I also do want to bring up some other additions that the Baltimore Ravens did make here in the offseason. Not as major ones, kind of ones that went under the radar, but I thought are noteworthy. I think bringing back Chidobe Awuzie was huge for this Ravens team. He was a consistent contributor last year in the secondary, only signed him for $5 million. Obviously the joke with $5, but a ton of McChicken, whatever it was, that the meme online with Chidobe Awuzie. Either way, Awuzie was a starting corner last year. I thought he was better than Marlon Humphrey. I thought he was better than Nate Wiggins. I thought he was their best cornerback last year. And so it's very, very important that Baltimore brought him back. They also signed Jalen Hawkins from New England on a 2-year deal worth $5 million per season. I thought he was going to get a lot more in this free agency market. He had 4 picks last year, 71 tackles. He's a well-rounded, versatile safety. And after the Ravens did lose Darius Washington and Alohi Gilman, I knew they needed to add depth to the safety room because while Hamilton and Malachi Starks are great, obviously having depth never hurts because of injuries, but also I think Kyle Hamilton is going to play in the box and kind of be used as that versatile pawn chess piece as Derwin James was in Los Angeles. Jesse Minter said that he kind of learned from Mike McDonald and about how McDonald used Kyle Hamilton in that defense. That's how he used Derwin James in that Chargers defense. And I think he's going to use Kyle Hamilton in a similar way, allow him to roam all over the field. So I think having an extra safety back there in a guy like Jalen Hawkins, who is dependable, who is durable, who makes plays all over the field, who is a ball hawk, I think that is a huge move for the Ravens to bring him in after the amount of success he had with New England last year. And I also think signing tight end Durham Smythe was a respectable signing as well to, again, kind of indirectly replace Charlie Kohler. Similar receiving limitations, but I think Smythe is great because he is familiar with Doyle's offense, and I think he is, he's not a great receiver, but he is a great run blocker, and I think that is important for a Ravens team that, again, lost Kohler, lost Patrick Ricard, so we also really love Baltimore bringing in Durham Smythe. Those, again, just kind of 3 additions that I really love, and I think Jesse Minter and Declan Doyle are going to work really well with Awuzie, with Hawkins, and with Durham Smythe, and I guess Anthony Weaver, too, for some of those guys defensively. I think this new regime is going to work with them really well in implementing their skill sets into this new regime here in Baltimore. And then last but not least, I wanted to talk about the Ravens re-signing Tyler Huntley. I thought the contract was completely fair across the board, 2 years, $11.5 million, which equates to just under $6 million per season. I think it was a great contract for both sides because for Tyler Huntley, a lot of that is guaranteed. And so essentially you're going to get $12 million almost over the next 2 seasons, where there's a chance you may not even play. If Lamar Jackson plays 17 games and plays all in the postseason, there's a chance you may not even play and you pick up $12 million. You weren't really going to get that money anywhere else. I think he fits in Baltimore. I think he works really well in Baltimore. And for the Ravens, sure, $6 million is very, very expensive at the quarterback position for a backup quarterback, but he's also someone that the Ravens know they can win with when they've tried other guys at that backup quarterback spot. Cooper Rush, who was just recently released, Josh Johnson, it hasn't worked. Huntley is kind of a mini Lamar. He has a very similar skill set to Lamar Jackson, and the Ravens offense hasn't skipped a beat with Huntley instead of Jackson in the most recent occasions that we have seen Tyler Snoop Huntley in the football game. And so I think bringing him back, it's not an overpay at all, but it also definitely is enough money where they were able to bring him in, and it assures the Ravens that they have one of the best backup quarterbacks in the NFL on their hands. And if Lamar Jackson, who has struggled with injuries throughout his career, if he does continue to struggle with injuries, you have someone in Tyler Snoop Huntley who works really well with this offense, who is just like Lamar Jackson. You don't need to really change the scheme, and he's someone that you can win football games with against high-level football teams. And so I think it was a great move for Baltimore to bring back Tyler Huntley, completely disregard anything Cooper Rush could have brought to the table. It was not pretty in his 1 3/4 games in Baltimore last year. And so it was certainly never the right fit. And I think Tyler Huntley is going to do some great things in Baltimore, if need be, as the backup quarterback here with this team. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this edition of Flock Forever. A longer one than usual, but we wanted to break down a ton of Baltimore's big free agency moves. And yeah, they brought in Trey Hendrickson, and not only that too, but Trey Hendrickson is also somebody that has been great down the stretch. Jesse Minter says he wants closers, and he wants dependable players, and he wants guys who can wreck the game down the stretch. And that's exactly what Trey Hendrickson has done among the leaders in sacks. I think he actually leads the NFL in sacks in the fourth quarter since 2020, one of the leaders since 2021 when he joined Cincinnati. And so I think that's somebody that Ravens fans are certainly excited to have here. And while it's no Maxx Crosby, I think the Ravens still did some decent work in this free agency market. They are certainly not done. A lot to add to the offensive line, a lot to add to this pass catching room, a lot to add to the secondary, but it was certainly a start for the Ravens after chaos ensued a few days ago. And I'm very curious to see how Eric DeCosta and how this Ravens front office really reconfigures this roster in the coming weeks and then with the NFL draft to make sure that this new regime with Jesse Minter, Declan Doyle, and Anthony Weaver is in good hands for the foreseeable future. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this edition of Flock Forever. And again, please stay tuned with a ton of great content coming up soon. Signing off, I'm your host, Chase Coburn, saying so long from Flock Forever.